Beautiful people of the internet, and obviously some of you ugly ones as well. I never want you to feel left out at all. Welcome back to another episode of the Lifestyle Lab with your host, Sam. We are on episode number 13, where I'm going to provide for you guys a little bit of a mental health update. Now, as always with this, I do want to provide a trigger warning because I am going to be talking about mental health. I don't know exactly the direction that I'm going to go with this. So yeah, I do kind of want to always just put potential trigger warning out there anyway, because I am going to be talking about mental health. These are based on my own experiences. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counsellor. I'm just a dude who's working and living through his own experiences and trying his best to articulate that and convey some potential ideas that have been really, really helpful for me up until this point in my life. So, yeah, like I said, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counsellor. Should you feel like that is something that you potentially want help with, please don't feel alone with this, because this is kind of going to be what I'm going to get into a little bit more in this episode specifically. But yeah, don't it is very, very natural to feel alone. It's very, very natural to feel like no one would understand and that you are the only person in the world who feels this way. But I can promise you right now, you are not. And as I kind of start to run through things in this episode, maybe you'll start to resonate. Maybe you'll start to sort of question your own methods and what you've done to sort of support yourself with your mental health up until this point, and maybe start to consider new ideas off the back of it. And if it's done that, then in my mind, I've done my job. But I suppose the reason I've thought that it would be good to provide a mental health update today is because today I actually feel really, really good. I feel really good, and I think it always helps when the day is today, the 6th of March, and the sun is absolutely beaming through the windows today. Like it genuinely feels like a summer's day today, and I feel really, really good today. And it's not just because of the weather. Obviously, the weather does help, but there's been a lot of things that I've been doing over the last few weeks, kind of since I announced that my mental health had been in the bin, and it probably kind of hasn't resonated with me how bad it had got for how long until I started to do more of some of the things that I'm going to talk about in this episode. And I suppose right now I sit here feeling really, really good, but it's probably been quite a time since I have felt this way, which has kind of made me think that whilst it was only just a couple of weeks ago that I'd said my mental health was in the bin and that I'd felt really, really bad and I'd felt really sort of run down and fed up, it has been even longer since I felt this way, which makes me think that it had been even longer since I'd realised how shit I'd actually felt. And I think the thing is with mental health is that people have a different tolerance. Depending on who you are, people have very different tolerances to challenge and adversity and problems in their life, that people are a lot more sensitive to these things, so they realize how crap these things make them feel. And there's other people who are just going through life accepting that these sort of things are normal. And whilst I don't think that part of the human experience is having an easy time of it, is absolutely not. And you will 100% be challenged and you will 100% go through hardships. It's the tolerance that you have for these hardships and your ability to bounce back that determines how effectively you're managing your mental health. And I think for me, it hasn't really kind of been until today, maybe the last couple of days, that I realized, wow, fuck. Even though a few weeks ago was when I decided no, enough was enough. It's been a long time since I have felt the way that I have felt today. And as someone who has suffered from depression and high anxiety and very, very high expectations, which I'll kind of go into shortly, I know that I have been here before, and I know that I have felt this way before. My concern is that I don't keep up with the things that have helped me, one, manage and turn to face the things that have actually been challenging me and bringing me down and running my cup empty, and two, keeping up with that long term, basically. Because I think it's very, very easy as a human being to turn around and accept that things are shit, but not accept that they're shit enough in order to make a difference or start to change things. And I think what that does is that almost kind of breeds I guess a mindset of complacency, and people in that instance try to normalize how it is that they feel. And again, whilst, like I said, part of the human experience is going through hardships, is going through difficult times, it's also your responsibility to turn to face the very thing that's bringing you down, and face it, because it's only at that point will you actually start to be able to formulate a plan on how you are going to improve your mental state. And unfortunately, it takes sometimes a long time to realize how shit it is that you actually feel, or you get caught on a bad day where that is the tipping point. And people's tolerances are different depending on who you are for those things. So yeah, if you're someone who's kind of maybe not necessarily struggling mentally, or not struggling mentally as much as you think you are, but who are faced with hardships, who are maybe not sure, or yeah, who are not sure of their tolerance for these things, then start to ask that question. And I think that's a very, very good place to start. Start to ask yourself the question, well, am I living the life that I want to be living? Am I aligned with the values that I have as a human being? And are those things that I'm living by or doing each day bringing me happiness and contentment in life? Which I think is always something that as a human being we're striving to achieve. And for me, I've spoke about this before, but I think it's probably going to be quite important to talk about it again. For me, where a lot of my depressive episodes have come from is through my expectations in life, and my expectations of wanting to provide and help people as much as I possibly can, in fear that as a person, as a man, as a boyfriend, as a son, as a friend, I'm not good enough. And whether you're a mum, a dad, a brother, a sister, a cousin, a teacher, a banker, a lawyer, a whoever, I think that's always most people's biggest fear, is feeling like they're not good enough, or is feeling like they're not important to the people they love and care about the most. And I think for me, that has always been my biggest fear, is feeling like I'm not good enough, or feeling like I'm not important enough for people to have around in their life. And so what I've always done is I've always kind of placed these unnecessary expectations on myself and on my life of trying to be more than I probably am. And that's quite a humbling experience. Cheers, Pepper. Thank you. Pepper's next to me, my mum and dad's dog. And he's quite an anxious, spooky dog, so you'll hear a noise, you'll be like, woo! Oh, there he goes. There he goes. So we'll pause this and then we'll come back to it. I do apologise for that. So now what you'll probably notice, if you're watching this on MP4 or video on YouTube, is that the lighting has very much changed, because what I've had to do is I've had to close the blinds so that Pepper doesn't get distracted, or so that he doesn't start barking for absolutely no reason. So yes, I do apologise for that. And I actually have no idea where, even though it was literally a minute ago, I have no idea where I had left off. I was pretty much saying how in life I think people's biggest fear is feeling like they're not good enough. So then what they'll do is they'll overcompensate and they'll set these very, very high expectations on themselves to try and be more than what they probably are. And for me, I've done that always throughout my life. I've always had probably unfair expectations that I've set on myself. And there was I was listening to a podcast last week, and the podcast had said that expectations are your biggest liability. And it kind of took me back a little bit, because I started to think about the expectations that I had on my life, about the things within my life that have been challenging for me and quite difficult for me. And I thought to myself, well, one, where did these come from? And two, what have they brought me up until this point, apart from guilt, shame, anxiety, discomfort? And again, for those of you that have listened to some podcasts previously, I am going to therapy, and these are some of the questions that I have been asking of my therapist and of myself. And I am finally, or I have been at a point where I have been very, very thankful for the expectations that I have placed on myself, even though, despite the feelings that I have felt as a result of those expectations that I listed only just a few seconds ago, I felt that those expectations have actually been what has driven me as well. And again, like I said, I'm thankful for that. But as I am getting older, I'm very much learning to slow down, feel at peace with where I'm at, and what I am contributing as a boyfriend, as a friend, as a son, as a human being, and accepting that is more than enough. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that people struggle with as well, is feeling like what they're doing is more than enough. Because if we kind of even bring this back to sort of fat loss terms, which is what I help people with, and their mindset around that, one of the biggest things I say to my clients is that you'll probably find that you don't actually need to do much more than you're doing. Sure, people appreciate what exercise does for the health. Sure, people know that a calorie deficit is what drives fat loss, but people will always try to bite off more than they can chew, for lack of a better term, and that they'll try to do a lot more than what their lifestyle actually allows for them to do long term. So really what you have to do is kind of look at the back end of your life and tidy that up a little bit. And with me, when I combine the expectations that I had for my life to what it was I was doing currently in my life, those two things didn't match up. And that's where I had in the middle these feelings of feeling run down, fed up, and unfulfilled. And whilst exercise and eating nutritionally dense foods and meditation and all these sorts of things were things within my life that I have always done, I actually found that as I was getting caught up in my expectations, and I was starting to feel more of these feelings that I was feeling, like I said, run down, fed up, feeling defeated, etc., etc., I actually stopped doing the things in my life that had helped me manage those feelings in the first place. And basically, what I've been doing over the last few weeks since I announced that my mental health had been in the bin and that something had to change was reconnecting with what I love doing, genuinely. What I actually really love doing. And what that had me do was take time away from things that, yeah, are important, but not as important as I had not expected them to be, but as I had prioritized them to be, you know? I'd overthought the things that I was doing were a lot more important to me and where I was wanting to go and the life I was wanting to live than what they actually were. And it wasn't until I started to connect back with what it is that I actually love doing. For example, getting outside, getting fresh air, gratitude journaling, reading a little bit more, exercising more intuitively instead of it being majorly structured, enjoying more nutritionally dense foods. I'd started taking creatine again, which is something that has been proven to improve your cognitive ability and stuff like that, and regulations of emotions, and reduce brain fog, as it were. For those of you who will probably be very aware of what that brain fog feeling, like when you walk into a room and you forget why the fuck you walked into that room in the first place, or that feeling of choice paralysis. Creatine has had proven benefits of improving on that. So these were things that I kind of started to slot in. And when I say journaling, I've actually started taking pen to paper a lot more because of how my mind works and the many emotions and feelings that I feel throughout the day and the many thought processes that go through my head a day. Whilst I have my therapy sessions that I go to take my thoughts and feelings to, I've actually started taking my thoughts and feelings to the page as well, and writing things down. And that has, I'll be honest, been a little bit of a game changer for me, because if you are anything like me who suffers with poor mental health and depression and high levels of anxiety, etc., that overthinking, essentially, I with all those feelings combined, I essentially overthought myself into nothingness. I overthought myself into the abyss, to the point where I wasn't doing the things that had helped me sort of manage those feelings and emotions up until that point. And taking pen to paper has really, really helped. And to be honest, when it came to journaling, I didn't really know where to start with it. But I actually found that just first writing down how it is that you feel kind of gives you a little bit of like a ball of yarn, like the wool, the little bit of the wool that you can tease out from the ball of yarn is enough to kind of get things going. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh, journaling's not for me, I'm not saying you have to go and write a bloody novel or anything like that, but starting with writing down how you feel and seeing where that takes you, and writing down the thoughts that come to your head as a result of doing that, has given me some respite from the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that pretty much run my entire day outside of that 5-10 minutes that I take for journaling. You combine that with the therapy sessions that I've been doing, and in the last couple of weeks I've been exercising a little bit more, because up until that point, like I said, I'd sort of overthought myself into nothingness. I'd overthought myself into feeling fed up, run down, etc., that exercise had actually sort of fallen by the wayside. So adding training and exercise back in there has again provided a little bit more of a respite, even though my mind is still going when I'm exercising. It hasn't really sort of given me the break. It has helped me feel in the moment a lot more energetic and a lot more, had me feeling a lot more ready to take on the very things that have been challenging me up until this point. So there are quite a few things there within my week now that are providing me that respite and providing me that space to be able to just start to articulate my thought processes and feelings into an actionable plan, basically. Because I think that's probably the biggest, that was the biggest struggle I was having. Was, yes, I was overthinking myself into absolutely nothingness. It resulted in me feeling a certain way as well, the but also the loneliness that comes as a result of that is quite difficult and quite challenging because of the expectations I've always had for my life, and the forward thinking, planning, methodical brain that I have. I'd always thought that I was different to other people, or I was different to my friends group specifically, in that I always was very, very ambitious and see myself doing really great things. But by doing that and actioning those things, I was kind of doing things that my friends and people around me weren't doing, which stood me out. But when I wasn't necessarily achieving the things that in my mind I was expecting to achieve, I couldn't default back to where they were, so because I didn't resonate with them. So I found myself very much within that middle ground where, yeah, I have people who love me and who care about me, but don't understand completely how it is or what it is that I'm going through, but hadn't quite connected with people within my industry or people who were living the life that I had expected to be living up until this point. And you combine that with the feelings that I was feeling in the middle of those two things, and I had essentially what was a bit of a clusterfuck of a time. And I guess the best way to describe it, and I've said it already, was that felt or does feel very, very lonely. Like people didn't get me, like people didn't understand me. And I think when you're feeling that way, when you feel depressed, or when you feel highly strung, when you feel anxious, you feel run down or fed up, the worst feeling in the world is feeling like no one understands you, or feeling like if you were to take how it was that you felt and try to articulate it to someone, that in amongst all those feelings you couldn't articulate it well enough for that person to understand, or if you did articulate it well enough, the risk was that they still didn't understand because they couldn't resonate with how it is that you feel. And that's hard. That's really, really tough, because when you feel the way that you feel, the last thing that you want to do is try to explain it to someone who you feel doesn't understand you. And I suppose what I want to say off the back of that is that you are, whilst you might feel like you're the only person who feels the way that you feel, you don't. I can promise you right now that you don't. And the loneliness that you feel off the back of that, you're not the only one who feels that way. I can understand and appreciate 100% what it feels like trying to articulate how it is you feel to someone who you feel might not understand you. And that is that's a very, very tiring experience, and the loneliness that you feel off the back of that is quite debilitating and quite excruciating, to be honest. And I suppose what I just want to say is that you're not, like, you are not alone. Genuinely, like, I resonate with that so much. And so part of what I have been trying to do is, whilst I've been adding in these things that have been giving me that respite from my feelings and my emotions, I've also been trying to connect with other people who feel very, very similar to how I feel, and making time for those people a lot more, and having more of those types of conversations that I want to be having has made me feel 10 times better. So if you're someone who's sitting there who feels a certain way about their mental health, who feels a certain way about their anxiety, please reach out to me, and understand that whilst you feel lonely, you're not alone in how you feel. And yeah, I suppose that kind of brings me to the end of my mental health update. In short, and to kind of summarize, I feel really good. I do. I feel really good. I feel excited for the future. I've learned to lower my expectations, and that probably sounds a bit maybe defeatist to some, maybe defeatist to me. Maybe that's still part of something that I'm still working through, but your expectations are your biggest liability. Lean into your values, lean into actions that align with your values, and I can promise you that you're not going to be going too far wrong there. And should this be something that you're struggling with right now, please do not hesitate to message me. You will find my Instagram link down below in the description. My direct messages are always open, genuinely always open. So if this is something that you feel like you're struggling with, please reach out. This is actually something that I help my clients with as well, is managing those expectations of life against what is the reality of their situation. I find that that is probably the biggest trigger for why they feel the way they feel and why they struggle with their mental health as much as they do. Like I said, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counsellor, I'm just someone who has gone through his own experiences with mental health and done certain things to try and alleviate some of those feelings, but try to actually manage and work through the things that have been depleting my cup, as it were. So helping my clients manage their expectations is something that we actually do. So if coaching is something that you feel like you could benefit from, again, my direct messages are always open. If you have any questions about anything I've said, please message me. Thank you all very, very much for listening. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, YouTube, the subscribe button always goes a very, very long way as well. So I will chat with you all in the next episode. Thank you.